Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm going to be taking a look at Carnage from level 70 to 80, as well as 80 to T4, not only in PvE, but also PvP. My overall impressions of the character are that he does quite a lot of burst damage, however his survival is kind of under par unless or until you get him to T4, in which case it becomes a lot better, sort of like Black Widow with her level 80 to T4. And besides that, his performance does seem a little bit inconsistent because he's so heavily reliant on taking damage for that damage accumulation and for his overall performance. Jumping straight into it, on the PvE side, all of the testing that I did was with no damage proc at all. I was lucky enough to pull his artifact from the Essence chest, so I do have a 3-star version of that, and I have to say it did make PvE testing a lot easier because his survival is just so lackluster. If you are going to build the character for PvE, I would highly recommend a CTP of Rage as your first and best option because his kit basically fully supports it. He has guaranteed crit rate, he has guard break immunity, and even includes some additional crit damage. On top of this, most of his skills do require some kind of delay cancelling, so if you are going to try to use something like an energy or a CTP of Destruction, you're likely not going to be able to proc on the skill that you want. I'm really hoping that the artifact for this month's collector vault is Carnage, because for people that pick up this uniform, they're really going to notice the survival issues if they don't have that immortal effect, not only for PvE, but also more primarily for PvP. Either way, the character's damage output is pretty decent, especially if you can max out his damage accumulation most of the time. As you can see from this clip, even on stage 9 of Knull with no leadership or support, I was still able to beat him with about 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. If you've seen some of my other videos, you'd know that this is a good finishing time to show that the character is at least good for PvE. Usually, if a character can finish with 2 minutes and 40 seconds left or even less than that, then it is a strong indication that they are very good for PvE. The character isn't really as easy to play as some of the other ones that we've gotten because he is very reliant on that damage accumulation from his third skill, and you do have to take a lot of damage to basically fill that up. However, one of the issues is that he doesn't really have a lot of healing because you basically have to pick up those little blobs to get health back. He doesn't have any healing passively in his kit as is. This makes his playstyle a little bit clunky since you basically have to stop attacking to heal, and you also have to really time your skills when the opponent is attacking you. Even though his performance was very promising at stage 9, when I went to stage 19 and the burst damage was less of a factor, and the healing and getting the damage accumulation was more of a factor, you can see that I wasn't actually able to beat stage 19, although I did get pretty close, and I guess if I played it a little better, I could have done it. But he would still finish with basically no time left. On the third test, I bumped up the stage to 35 and added 2 supports to see if he could actually complete the first phase in under 2 minutes. Unfortunately, he couldn't do that, which is an indicator that he wouldn't be able to actually complete the stage. However, keep in mind that if this was 6 stages lower, as I've tested some of the other female hero characters with no damage proc on stage 29, they have completed that, and I'm pretty sure Carnage would have too, which again is kind of an indicator that he is good for PvE, but a little bit inconsistent because again he relies heavily on the damage accumulation. If you look at the giant boss raid test, he was able to complete the first phase in under 2 minutes, which means that he probably could have completed the fight with no damage proc. However, because of his heavy reliance on that damage accumulation, and you're not guaranteed to get it max every time, it's also possible that he might not have been able to do it. What I'm trying to say again is that he does have good damage, however, you won't necessarily see that all the way through in a long fight because you have to play him very concisely. When I took the character to level 80, I was able to complete the first phase of stage 35 about a minute faster, and then was able to complete the entire stage with about a minute and 40 seconds left. To get a better idea of his improvement at T4, I also did a level 60 of Knull when he was at level 80, but he wasn't able to complete the first phase in under 2 minutes, finishing with a little over 2 minutes and 40 seconds left. The stat boost with the T4 is pretty in line with combat types. He gets a good 10,000 roughly physical damage increase, but does get a pretty hefty HP increase, being over 40,000. This is good not only for his survival, because he does get more health, but also because the T4 gives you health back based on the damage that you deal, and that goes to a maximum of 10% of his maximum HP, meaning that the higher his total health is, the more health he'll get back. So you can see that with the T4 skill unlocked, I was able to complete stage 35 a minute and 20 seconds faster, but because I completed it faster than 2 minutes, it is an indication that he has a better improvement because you are restricted through the boss's animations and phase changes. Looking over at stage 64, he completed that about 50 seconds faster with the T4, and then remarkably enough, he was able to complete stage 64 with no damage proc and with still 40 seconds left over. From my experience, adding a damage proc to the build usually shaves off at the very minimum 1 minute from the clear time, but can go as high up as a minute 30 seconds or more. So if I was to use a CTP of Rage, I would easily say that the clear time for this stage would be anywhere from a minute 40 seconds to 2 minutes left over. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to test Giant Boss Raid at level 80. However, at T4, he does complete the first phase about a minute faster, so I'm assuming that with the level 80, it should be maybe around 30 seconds faster or a little bit slower than that. I kind of left this information off a little bit too long, but the rotation that I use for the character is essentially 3, delay cancel, 4, delay cancel, 5. You delay cancel the third after he does his yell and the tentacles show up, and you delay cancel the fourth after he hits the ground and the spikes show up there. Also, if you do want to fill up the ultimate faster, I would recommend canceling the 1 and 2 whenever it's available. Once you have access to his ultimate skill, the rotation becomes 3, delay cancel 4, delay cancel 6, which is your ultimate, and you delay cancel that after he goes up in the air and these spikes start to rain down. From there, you immediately go into your 5th skill. The ultimate does have a single skill damage proc to it, however the timing is very generous, so if you don't take too long, you can transfer it over to the 5th skill and try to layer on as much damage as you can. You can use the T4 skill whenever it's available, however if you do see your ultimate about to fill up and the T4 is close as well, you can hold off using it so that you can match the ultimate with the T4 at the same time. You can see that even though I finished the first phase relatively quickly, trying to get consistent damage for the rest of the fight is tricky, especially when the attacks that Dormammu does kind of CC you and keep you from using the rest of your skills in the tight gap where you have max damage accumulation and your procs are up. Still, I'd say that finishing with over 4 minutes left and no damage proc is quite good, since ironically I have finished with maybe the same amount of time with some characters that even do have a damage proc. If you do want to use the character for Alliance Battle Extreme, he does have paralysis for that season, however it doesn't seem like he has burn or silence in his kit. Still, I don't think that matters too much since most people will likely eye him at T4 for Alliance Battle Legend, considering that he has Snare in his kit and that is one of the requirements to stop the Fire Giant from his roar or whatever, the roar cancel. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to test him in ABX at level 70 or 80, but I'm guessing that he probably would have scored somewhere around 8 million with no damage proc, since at T4 I was able to score 9.7 million. I'm not entirely sure how he would do in Alliance Battle Legend, but because his damage is still good even without the absolute max accumulation, I'm assuming that he would be pretty decent. On the PvP side, the character is a little bit weird to encapsulate. His burst damage is really good, however he is very fragile for the most part unless you build him in a specific way. And even then, the character is tanky in short bursts, but doesn't really have much sustain or health recovery. So just a heads up, the first 3 tests that I do in these clips are with just an invincible obelisk and a 3-star artifact, which you absolutely need the artifact for any kind of PvP. Carnage's damage is pretty good. His AI usually opens with the 4th skill, which also has super guard break, so oftentimes you'll see the opponent kind of being knocked around. And then oftentimes from that, he'll go into his 3rd skill, which has the iframe ignore as well as the damage accumulation. From then on, he usually goes back into the 4th skill or the 5th skill if that one is still on cooldown. The 3 and the 4 are basically his main skills, which is good that the AI prioritizes them. He gets, again, the damage accumulation from the 3rd skill, and the 4th skill gives him up to 90% penetration to all sources. He also has the benefit of having guard break immunity natively in his kit, as well as a self debuff, on top of the fact that you also have access to that coveted immortality artifact. I almost forgot to mention that he has 40% damage mitigation too, but you can see that his health just keeps getting chipped down, and he usually sticks around at low health because he has nearly no health recovery. He has 10% on his 5th skill, but he hardly ever uses that, and the blobs that heal you from his 3rd skill don't really get picked up by the AI. One of the only ways to improve his survival is to max out his damage mitigation, which is what you see in these clips, since I'm using a Steel Authority to get the damage mitigation stacked on top of the 40% that he already has, as well as using Agent Venom with his artifact that provides even more damage mitigation. You can see the difference since I was actually able to beat the team by stacking more mitigation, whereas I wasn't before that. I don't really know how the interaction with the damage accumulation from the Authority works with his own damage accumulation. However, I still notice that he does tend to one-shot, so I'm assuming that there isn't a negative interaction there. So again, if you do want to make the character tankier and try to survive longer, a Steel Authority is really your only option, because using something like a regen won't help you if he doesn't have any health recovery, and using maybe a CTP of Transcendence, considering he does have guard break immunity, will only really give you invincibility, which opponents with penetration can still go through. However, a Mighty Authority with the Steel effect alone might not cut it, since you won't really get to the max mitigation amount to keep a lot of damage from coming in. You likely will also need Agent Venom with his artifact that gives you even more damage mitigation, and possibly even Colossus to get the max amount. You could alternatively use a Brilliant CTP of Authority on him to get that mitigation capped out faster and not need all these other sources, but most people don't have those lying around. And even with all that considered, the character might not necessarily even get tankier, because it's really dependent on the opponent hitting you slowly, because if they hit you very quickly with a lot of burst damage, the Steel effect won't even activate, and it won't really make a difference for your survival. So I'm not entirely sure what to recommend for the character as his most ideal build. You can try to make him tankier with Steel Authority if that's what you want. However, I think that for a lot of people, it might be a lot easier for them just to use something like a CTP of Greed and just double down on the max damage, trying to take out the opponent as quickly as possible before taking too much damage yourself. You could alternatively also even use a CTP of Rage, similarly to how Warlock can use a CTP of Energy, because you do have guard break immunity natively and penetration on his 4th skill, which he usually opens with. However, if you compare that to Greed, I'm pretty sure the Greed will be better, because the ambush effect also gives you the ability to not get super guard broken, as well as get damage reflected back to you. Not to mention the fact that you also get a little bit of healing, ignore dodge, and the ability to ignore the opponent's mitigation. You can see from those last 3 clips that the character at T4 does get a little bit better because of the increased health, and because if you can fill up the T4 meter, you can get some healing back from the damage that he deals from that effect. I also included those clips because it shows that at T4 the improvement was enough to allow the character to beat certain characters that he struggled with before, like T4 Hulk and Adam Warlock. As you can see from this clip, at level 80 he wasn't able to beat both lives of him, but at T4 he was. Also, I didn't really include many clips of him at level 80, even though I did test him a bunch, because his damage didn't really change. He could already one-shot, even with no damage proc, and his survival pretty much stayed the same. If you're wondering how the character plays on manual, you essentially just use the 3rd skill and cancel that into the 4th skill. The 3rd skill gives you extra damage from the accumulation, as well as the iframe ignore, allowing the 4th skill to do a lot of damage, and because it has 90% penetration and that super guard break, can basically just one-shot opponents or keep them CC'd long enough to basically win. The benefit of playing on manual is that you can also improve his healing by collecting the blobs that come out from the third skill. I was able to get at least one test with him in Alliance Conquest, and I basically used the subpar team to test his solo potential and deliberately took him up against a team that he would have difficulty versus. So that would be Emma giving him a type disadvantage, as well as Silver Surfer and Emma both having Reflect and iframe Ignore. You can see from this clip just how good his burst damage is on that fourth skill even with no damage proc, and also see that you basically need to form the team in a specific way to improve his survivability. The steal effect alone won't give him enough mitigation, and you need something like Agent Venom or Colossus on the team to improve his survivability. At the time of recording, I actually got another fight in Alliance Conquest to highlight the difference that the mitigation stacking makes if you add characters like Colossus and Agent Venom with his artifact. I did go a little bit overboard since you likely only need Agent Venom with a good enough artifact and CTP roll, but you can see that the mitigation is pretty good to extend his survivability, since I was able to tank Warlock's 5th skill and then survive long enough to use the T4 skill in the second part of the fight. Overall, I'm not entirely sure if I would recommend the character yet, since it seems like you do need to build him up a good amount for him to have some pretty solid performance, at least in PvP and things like Alliance Conquest. And in PvE, his survival is kind of low, and again, you do need a little bit of investment, like getting his artifact, and if you are trying to push to higher stages, you likely will also need that T4 in order to get some additional healing. That said, I'm pretty sure you could get some good value out of the character just by adding a CTP Rage, at least for things like Alliance Battle Legend, and even for things like Alliance Conquest. Still, I would maybe hold off from getting the character's uniform, considering that Black Friday is coming up, and we don't know what kind of upgrades are coming to characters like Namor and Black Panther with their movie tie-ins. So that is the video for T4 Carnage. The next one that I'm going to be looking at is how much better Gore got with his upgrades. I'm not entirely sure if I can get that video out as soon as I can, even though I have finished the testing for it, because this weekend is Canadian Thanksgiving. Either way, if you did enjoy the video or found it informative, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already, and sharing it with others since it might help them out, and I know it definitely helps out my view count as well. Anyways, thanks for taking the time to watch this, but the video is now over.